The day I walked into my sister's store as a secret shopper, I had already been invisible for 23 years. The company was called Solaris Beverage Company, a national chain with 1,400 locations and a reputation for cheerful, efficient service. I had worked there for 8 years, climbing from part-time barista to one of the most senior brand compliance officers in the company. My job was simple. I showed up unannounced, ordered a drink, and observed. Every quarter, the corporate office ran a random lottery to determine which locations would be audited, and every quarter, I flew to whatever city the algorithm selected. This quarter, the algorithm had selected store number 487, my sister Sabine's store. Sabine, my older sister by 3 years, the golden child, the one my parents had always described as the talented one, while I was the diligent one. She had been a shift supervisor by 21, a store manager by 23, and now, at 28, she managed a flagship location in a prime downtown district. Her store was one of the highest grossing in the region. Her employees loved her. Her customers wrote glowing reviews. And I was the sister who had been quietly, methodically outperforming her for our entire lives, without anyone ever noticing. That was about to change. The audit protocol was strict. I was to enter the store as an ordinary customer, observe the service, document any violations, and only reveal my identity after I had gathered sufficient evidence. To maintain objectivity, I used the company's mobile app to download a discount coupon, a small test of whether the store honored corporate promotions. Then I pulled on a nondescript windbreaker, tucked my company ID into an inner pocket, and walked through the front door of store number 487. The line was long, not just long, chaotic. Customers were clustered around the counter, their expressions ranging from impatient to resigned. The overhead menu displayed a full array of beverages, but the barista behind the counter was moving with the lethargic indifference of someone who had never faced a consequence in his life. His name tag read Brock, and his posture radiated contempt. I queued for 3 hours. I watched customer after customer approach the counter, place their orders, and receive their drinks. And I watched Brock systematically skip my number. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought it was incompetence. But as the 3rd hour ticked past and my number remained stubbornly uncalled, I understood. It was neither mistake nor incompetence that IT was policy. I stepped up to the counter. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carefully controlled. "I've been waiting for 3 hours. Can you tell me why my number keeps getting skipped?" Brock didn't look up. He was wiping down the espresso machine with a rag that had seen better days, his movements slow and deliberate. "Sorry, dude. Store policy. Promotional orders go last. If you can't wait, cancel your order, and no one's forcing you to buy anything." Store policy? I've read the Solaris Beverage Company employee handbook cover to cover. There is no policy that prioritizes full-price customers over promotional ones. Now he looked up. His eyes were flat and cold, the eyes of a man who had been given just enough power to abuse it. "Look, lady, that I don't make the rules, that I just enforce them. If you've got a problem, take it up with corporate." "I will. What's her name?" He smirked, reached up, and tore his name tag off his apron. He slapped it down on the marble counter between us with a crack that echoed through the store. "It's Brock, Assistant Manager Brock. My girlfriend's the manager here, so good luck getting anyone to care that I run this place." He leaned across the counter, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial sneer. "Imagine being so broke you need a coupon to afford a $5 drink. What era are you living in, scraping for coins like a starving stray dog?" I didn't respond, not because I didn't have a response. I had several, each more cutting than the last, but because Brock wasn't finished. He grabbed a black permanent marker and a piece of cardboard from behind the counter. I enlarged angry letters. He scrawled a message, then marched to the front door and taped it to the glass. The sign read, "No promo users or pets allowed." The handful of customers still waiting in line stared at the sign, then at Brock, then at me. Some of them looked uncomfortable. None of them spoke. And Brock turned back to me with a grin of pure, undisguised triumph. "There. Now it's official. You still want your discount drink, or are you going to slink back to whatever bargain bin you crawled out of?" The moment stretched. The store was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators and the distant sound of traffic. I could feel my pulse in my temples, a steady, rhythmic beat of adrenaline. Then, very slowly, I unzipped my windbreaker that I reached into the inner pocket, and I pulled out my company ID. Senior Brand Compliance Officer, badge number 1147. This is an unscheduled audit. You have exactly 60 seconds to call your manager to the front of the store before I escalate this to a full corporate investigation. Brock's face went through a remarkable transformation. The smirk vanished. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes fixed on the badge, the holographic Solaris logo, the raised lettering, the photograph of my face, and he understood. He understood that the woman he had been tormenting for 3 hours was not a coupon-clipping bargain hunter. She was the person who decided whether his store stayed open. I didn't. You can't. This is entrapment. The term you're looking for is compliance audit. It's in the employee handbook, the one you claim to have read. I placed the badge on the counter beside his discarded name tag. 60 seconds. Starting now. Brock stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a crate of almond milk. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it twice. The customers who had been waiting in line were now openly staring, some of them pulling out their own phones to record. The sign on the door, "No promo users or pets allowed," fluttered in the breeze from the air conditioning. The office door at the back of the store opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall and elegant, with dark hair swept back in a sleek ponytail and a manager's pin on her lapel. Sabine, my sister. She took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Brock's panicked face, the customers with their phones raised, the sign on the door, and me, standing at the counter with my badge in my hand. Elara. Her voice was flat. "What's going on?" "Sabine, I'm conducting a routine compliance audit of this location. Your assistant manager has provided me with extensive documentation of approximately 14 separate violations, including customer discrimination, health code infractions, and signage that violates the company's anti-harassment policy. I'll be filing my report within the hour." Sabine's jaw tightened. "Brock, what did you do?" Brock was babbling, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate, incoherent pleading. "I didn't know she was corporate. She had a coupon. I thought she was just some." "Some what?" I asked quietly. "Some broke nobody who didn't deserve to be treated like a human being? Some starving stray dog?" Brock's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Sabine turned on him with an expression that was equal parts fury and panic. She knew. She knew as well as I did that the violations I had documented were enough to trigger a full corporate investigation. She knew that her store's record would be flagged. She knew that her career was in my hands. "Elara," she said, her voice shifting into the sweet, coaxing tone she had used since we were children. "Let's be reasonable. Brock made a mistake. He'll apologize. You don't need to escalate this. We're sisters, family." "Family," I repeated. "The same family that spent our entire childhood telling me I would never be as good as you? The same family that called me a failure for taking a corporate job while celebrating you for managing a single store? That family?" Sabine's expression flickered with something that might have been guilt. "I never called you a failure." "No, you just never corrected anyone who did. You let them believe you were the talented one while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. You've been coasting on the family narrative for 23 years, but this is my world now. And in my world, store managers who allow their assistant managers to harass customers don't get to hide behind their little sisters." I pulled out my tablet and began typing up my preliminary report. Sabine watched me, her face pale, her hands clenched at her sides. Brock had retreated to the corner, his head in his hands. The customers were still recording, and the sign, the stupid, hateful sign, was still taped to the front door, fluttering like a flag of surrender. The audit was complete. The report was filed. And by the time I walked out of store number 487, Sabine's fate was sealed. The report I filed that evening was comprehensive. 14 major violations, including customer discrimination, failure to honor corporate promotions, health code infractions related to food storage temperatures, and the creation of a hostile environment for customers. The sign Brock had taped to the door, which I had photographed from 3 different angles, was the centerpiece. It was a blatant violation of the company's core values, and it was attached to the front door of a store managed by the sister of a senior compliance officer. The optics were catastrophic. But the more I dug, the more I uncovered. The violations at store number 487 were not isolated to Brock. They were systemic, extending far deeper into the store's management, and far higher up the corporate ladder than I had ever imagined. Sabine had been falsifying inventory records for months, skimming premium ingredients and selling them on the secondary market. She had been manipulating employee time cards, shorting her staff on overtime while claiming the extra hours for herself. She had been colluding with a regional supplier to purchase substandard ingredients at a discount and pocketing the difference. The store's glowing reviews, I discovered, had been purchased, a bot farm in Eastern Europe generating 5-star ratings for 25 cents each. But Sabine was not the top of the pyramid. The regional supervisor who was supposed to audit her store, a man named Victor Hale, had been accepting bribes to look the other way. And Victor Hale, I discovered through a trail of emails and financial records, was not acting alone. He reported directly to the Vice President of Operations, Harold Ashford, a man who had been skimming from the company for years, using a network of corrupt store managers and regional supervisors to siphon millions of dollars into offshore accounts. The conspiracy was vast, the evidence was overwhelming, and at the center of it all, unknowingly, was my sister, the golden child, the one my parents had always said would go far. She had gone far, straight into the heart of the largest corruption scandal in the company's history. The final exposure came at the Solaris Annual Leadership Summit in Chicago, a high-stakes corporate gathering where 2,000 store managers, regional directors, and C-suite executives from across the country convened. Sabine was there, seated in the front row with the other top-performing managers, her smile bright, her future seemingly secure. Victor Hale was on stage, delivering a speech about integrity and operational excellence. Harold Ashford, the VP of Operations, was in the wings, waiting to present the keynote. I was at the back of the auditorium, a tablet in my hand loaded with every document, every email, every financial record Marcus and I had assembled. The chairman of the board, Margaret Vanstjen, was beside me, a silver-haired titan of industry who had been quietly investigating Harold Ashford for months. "Are you ready, Alera?" she asked. I looked at the stage, at Victor Hale's smiling face, at Sabine's oblivious confidence. "I'm ready." I walked down the aisle. The auditorium went silent. Sabine's smile flickered and died. Victor Hale turned, his face registering confusion, then alarm. And I stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "Good morning. My name is Alera Vance. I am a senior brand compliance officer for Solaris Beverage Company. And I am here to inform you that approximately 40% of this company's regional management is under investigation for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy." The room erupted. I lifted my tablet, and the screen behind me came alive with documents. The falsified inventory records, the bot farm receipts, the shell company accounts, the emails between Victor Hale and Harold Ashford discussing how to manage the compliance audits. Sabine was staring at the screen, her face white as bone, as the evidence of her own crimes scrolled past in high definition. Victor Hale was backing toward the exit, but security had already blocked the doors. And Harold Ashford. Harold Ashford was standing in the wings, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a desperate hiss. By the time federal agents entered the auditorium 20 minutes later, the entire conspiracy had been laid bare before 2,000 witnesses. The agents arrested Victor Hale and Harold Ashford on stage. Sabine was taken into custody in the front row. 6 other regional managers were detained. And I stood at the podium, watching the empire of corruption crumble, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 23 years. Peace. The invisible sister was invisible no longer. And the company my grandfather had built was finally clean. Third-party objective commentary by Margaret Vanstjen, chairman of the board, Solaris Beverage Company. In 50 years of corporate leadership, I have never seen a more thoroughly documented compliance report than the one Alera Vance submitted on store number 487. She did not merely identify violations, she traced them to their source, following the corruption from a single store manager's office to the highest echelons of the company. Her work exposed a network of fraud that had been operating undetected for nearly a decade and cost the company an estimated $47 million in siphoned assets. What distinguishes Alera's approach is her unwavering commitment to protocol. She did not arrive at her sister's store seeking revenge. She arrived to conduct a standard audit. The violations she documented, the discriminatory queuing policy, the forged health and safety records, the hostile signage, would have triggered disciplinary action regardless of the manager's identity. The fact that the manager was her sister was incidental to the investigation, not the catalyst for it. The aftermath was a masterclass in corporate justice. Sabine was convicted on 12 counts of fraud and embezzlement, sentenced to 6 years, and ordered to pay restitution. Victor Hale received 14 years. Harold Ashford, the VP whose conspiracy reached the top floor, was convicted on 34 counts and received 22 years. Alara, promoted to Director of Brand Integrity, received the company's highest honor, the Sterling Award for Ethics and Compliance, from my own hands. Her audit protocols are now standard training for every compliance officer in the company, and the Brock incident is taught as a case study in exactly the type of predatory management behavior this company will never tolerate again. The trials lasted 18 months. Sabine was convicted on 12 counts of fraud and embezzlement and sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Victor Hale was convicted on 22 counts and received 14 years. Harold Ashford was convicted on 34 counts and received 22 years. The network of corrupt managers and suppliers was dismantled, the shell accounts were seized, and the stolen money, what could be recovered, was returned to the company's pension fund. I was promoted to Director of Brand Integrity, .my audit protocols. The same protocols I had used to document the violations at store number 487 were adopted company-wide. The sign that Brock had taped to the door, "No promo users or pets allowed," was preserved in a display case in the company's headquarters, a reminder to every employee that discrimination of any kind would not be tolerated. Sabine tried to contact me after her sentencing. She sent letters, asked for visits, begged for forgiveness, but I didn't reply. Not because I didn't love her. I did, in some complicated way that would probably never fully untangle, but because loving someone doesn't mean accepting the harm they've done. It doesn't mean pretending the sign wasn't taped to the door, the customers weren't turned away, the money wasn't stolen. My parents tried to intervene. They called me cold and unforgiving. They said I had destroyed Sabine over a small mistake. They asked how I could do this to my own sister. I told them that Sabine had done it to herself. I just documented the evidence. Then I asked them why, in 23 years, they had never once called me talented. They didn't have an answer. The woman who was invisible became the woman who wrote the rules. The sign on the door was torn down. And the sister who said I was nothing became the sister who learned, too late, that I was everything.